The Prime Minister pushes leaders to reach a consensus on borders. Also ahead, an interim report into Australia's devastating bushfires calls for widespread change. And stop theft targeted as police take action to disrupt the movement of stolen livestock. Hello and welcome to ABC Regional News. I'm Miriam Corowa with a closer look at what's making headlines in regional and rural Australia. It's been a significant week in the COVID crisis. Case numbers in Victoria continue to drop and there is growing optimism the state may have turned a corner. Those falling numbers have prompted Premier Daniel Andrews to plot a road out of the tough Stage 4 restrictions and begin opening up the state again. National Cabinet also met on Friday with the Prime Minister putting pressure on the state and territory leaders to reopen their borders. Scott Morrison warned that if they fail to act, the economic implications will be disastrous, both for the states and the nation more broadly. At the centre of the debate is a nationally agreed definition of designating COVID-19 hotspots.
We have provided a clinically based, scientifically based definition of what a hotspot is in Australia, and where states are moving to make different decisions on different criteria, I think it's only reasonable, not just to me, I'm just another Australian. It's important, I think, more broadly, that people understand why they would be taking a different assessment and what medical advice that was based on.
An interim report from the Royal Commission investigating the last fire season has raised the prospect of changing the national bushfire alert system and bolstering the country's water bombing fleet. It's also identified challenges in the way resources were shared between governments, urging greater cooperation in future.
The bushfire season from hell. 33 lives lost. Thousands left homeless, a nation blanketed in smoke and ash, many still picking up the pieces.
We got deployed into property protection at the top of the hill, and I stood all night and listened to my house burn. Yeah.
I feel personally that we were just left to our own devices and that we had no support.
The Commission heard resources were stretched to the limit across the nation.
That's not normal fire behaviour. It's just a holocaust. And it's not stoppable.
Today, advice from the Commission.
I know many of you are still living with the effects and devastation of the 2019 and 20 bushfires and are apprehensive about the impending bushfire season.
Today's interim report doesn't involve recommendations, but it does pose a number of questions, including whether the Commonwealth should have the legal power to declare a state of emergency, whether the Watch and Act bushfire alert is confusing and needs to change, and if governments need to buy more water bombers. The Royal Commissioners also identified challenges in the way firefighting resources are shared between states, suggesting the pandemic approach of regular national cabinet meetings should become a natural disaster staple.
What the report effectively says is what we've dealt with isn't unprecedented. It means this is what we're going to have to deal with into the future.
This inquiry was never going to be a finger-pointing exercise, and there will be recommendations handed down in the final report due at the end of October. But with fires already burning in parts of the nation, there's a great sense of urgency among residents in bushfire-prone communities. They want action now to avoid mistakes being repeated. Anna Henderson, ABC News, Canberra.
The community of Bacchus Marsh, west of Melbourne, claims it's being kept in the dark about the health risks of a plan to dump contaminated soil at a nearby mine. The EPA has now approved the proposal to dispose of waste from the Westgate Tunnel project.
Bacchus Marsh is worried it's about to become Melbourne's dumping ground.
It appears that we're just the stomping ground between a regional city and metropolitan Melbourne.
The soil comes from Melbourne's stalled Westgate Tunnel project and contains low levels of the chemical PFAS. A coal mine near Bacchus Marsh has offered to take the soil for a price.
We're concerned about the PFAS leaching into our waterways that we then use to irrigate farmland.
But Mattingley Coal Mine says it has a safe plan to store the soil, and now the state's environmental regulator agrees. The plan involves putting the soil in sealed containers and loading it onto trucks for the 50-kilometre journey through the western suburbs to Bacchus Marsh, where the mine sits about 2 kilometres from the town centre and just 200 metres from the nearest homes.
There's no amount of money that they could offer up that would make us feel happy and safe about having that toxic soil here.
Concerns have also been raised about the level of secrecy in the decision-making. In the EPA's published findings, the sections on the risk to human health is largely redacted, where significant concerns were raised about how they were calculated.
How could you have faith and trust? It makes it very, very difficult.
Whether this site in Bacchus Marsh is chosen ultimately comes down to the tunnel's builders, John Holland, and the state government. And with 3 sites all around Melbourne being considered, either way, it's not going to be a popular decision.
Well, the EPA have made some decisions. I've got no announcements to make about those.
They're leaving us very little option but to take legal action,
which could make the issue even more toxic. Amelia Terzon, ABC News, Bacchus Marsh.
Backpackers working in Queensland's Bundaberg region are calling for more to be done to stamp out dodgy labour hire contractors paying them illegal wages. There are almost 400 labour hire companies providing workers to the agriculture industry in the state, with 11 having their licences cancelled in the past year.
After losing her hospitality job at the start of the pandemic, American backpacker Kia Fowler took up work picking zucchinis in Bundaberg.
They told me that they would be paying me about $19 an hour, which I found out after I accepted the position was not a legal wage.
It's $24 as a casual under the Horticulture Award. She's lodged a complaint about the labour hire company with the Fair Work Commission.
I just want to say that they're held accountable to be paying what they're supposed to be paying.
Dutch worker Merle Quack was picking tomatoes for a piece rate and barely made $100 for 7 days' work.
I didn't have any time to complain or wait for a good job. I just needed to get my days done, so I had to accept whatever I was getting.
When she found casual hourly paid work, the pay slips were questionable. It's a similar story for fellow backpacker Ellie Lavar. The company she worked for has since had its licence cancelled for supplying false information to the Office of Industrial Relations.
The ABN number and the company name was different between pay slips. So one week it'd be one random name that you'd never heard of.
There are 385 labour hire companies providing workers to the agriculture industry in Queensland. The Office of Industrial Relations says 11 have had their licences cancelled in the last 12 months. It says all complaints are investigated to protect workers from being exploited. Those in the hostel industry say backpackers need to do their research to get the best experience.
There's a small percentage of people that bring the whole place into disrepute, but ultimately Bundaberg's a great place to come and do your farm work.
But not everyone agrees.
I wish I could say that I had a lovely time, that I would go back and work in Bundaberg, but in all honesty, I wouldn't know who to trust.
Johanna Marie, ABC News, Bundaberg.
Criminals looking to cash in on the soaring value of livestock are costing farmers millions of dollars each year. And this year, the rate of theft across regional New South Wales has jumped 9% so far. It's prompted New South Wales Police to start Operation Stock Check in the state's southern regions, led by the Rural Crime Prevention Team. To take us through what steps are being taken is State Rural Crime Coordinator, Detective Inspector Cameron Whiteside. Detective Inspector, welcome to Regional News. When it comes to livestock theft, what sort of scale are we talking about for this type of crime across New South Wales? How much is it hurting farmers?
Yeah, it's hurting farmers a great deal. And over the last 4 years, we've had in excess of 87,000 sheep stolen in New South Wales. And on top of that, 9,000 head of cattle at a sale yard gate price of approximately $18 million. But on top of that, goes the trauma that is experienced by our farmers and landholders, in that these farms are their homes. The young children live on these farms, and the mental health aspect and the trauma experienced through intimidation of people coming onto their property at all hours of night is quite significant. And this operation is an ongoing operation. It's a proactive operation, high visibility, aimed squarely at livestock theft.
So, Detective Inspector, just how sophisticated are some of the methods being used to steal cattle, sheep and other stock animals?
Yeah, there are varying degrees. There are the opportunist thief, which will steal small numbers of sheep or cattle or goats and other stock, but right up to semi-trailers with organised criminals preying upon our farmers. So this operation is aimed at disrupting those corridors, those theft corridors, in respect to the movement of stock. And what the operation is aimed at is increasing the knowledge, confidence and skills of all our police, not just the Rural Crime Prevention team, to interact with those people that are conveying stock around, whether it be in a trailer, a utility, a horse float, or even there's information that they're guttering out caravans to convey their stock. So this operation is ongoing. It's not flash in the pan. And my aim is to make this operation become as normal part of policing and country policing as random breath testing is.
So what sort of resources are being put towards this particular operation and the support that's been given for farmers to protect their properties?
Yeah, there's unprecedented support in respect to the increase of our rural crime prevention team over the last 2 years. But our rural crime investigators will be out educating our uniformed police, our small stations, sector police to engage with the community and also interact with those carrying livestock. But I need to make it clear that this operation is not aimed at livestock carriers and farmers. It's squarely aimed at criminals to disrupt the theft of livestock, but also to prevent it and just increasing our capabilities so we can have those crooks that prey upon our farmers looking over their shoulders.
And Detective Inspector, what can farmers do better to help protect their properties, especially given how big and remote a lot of farms are?
Yeah, it's a good question, and the Rural Crime Prevention team and police will not tell farmers how to run their farms. However, there's small things that you can do, whether that be just your numbering on your front gate, just having visibility of your farm from your farmhouse, but ensuring everything is marked in terms of stock, in terms of identification markers. But also a good thing to do is, and a good place to start is step outside your farm and just think like a criminal for 5 seconds. It'll give you an idea of where you're going to break in, what you're going to take and what time of day or night. But also on top of that, we've got plenty of resource material on our website, and if you search into your search engine, New South Wales Police Rural, there's plenty of tips and tricks in there, but also you can't beat the contact with your local policeman or your rural crime investigator who are more than happy to help you to target harden your property.
And in terms of this livestock situation with theft, just what happens to livestock in most cases?
Yeah, varying things happen, and it is a good question. There's small numbers can be butchered on site, on the property, taken away, and obviously the markers changed and sold through sale yards, etc. But we're finding at the moment with the great conditions of in feed around for stock that we believe that stock is being stolen and is being kept for a period of time. At the moment, the reward for stealing stock is quite high and the risk is quite low. So this Operation Stock Check plus also target hardening your property is one way that we want to increase the risk and to marry up with that to the reward, to make the reward that bit harder to get for our criminals.
Important steps to take there. Detective Inspector Cameron Whiteside, thank you so much for speaking to us on Regional News.
Thanks for your time.
The dominance of large supermarket contracts is knocking many traditional family farms from Australia's agriculture landscape. In the central Victorian town of Harcourt, more than 60 families grew apples in the middle of last century, but now there's only a handful left.
Growing apples is in the blood of Gary and Heather Pollard, whose families have worked on orchards in Harcourt for more than a century.
We're 5 generations, we go back. Always helped Dad in the orchard. That was a real thing.
The pair work 7 days a week, growing fruit and selling apples at farmers markets around the state. It's tough work for little reward, but it's something they love.
I've got customers that weren't even born and they were coming out with their parents. Now they're bringing their children out to buy apples off me. So I've known the families for a very long time.
But with no one to pass it on to, it's another Harcourt family that will leave the land.
It's a big weight on my shoulders being the last pollard in the area farming, because at the end of the day, when that finishes, that's the end of many generations. But that time is going to come.
And sadly, it's becoming a common story. Trevor Peeler works at the local cooperative cool store, where local growers have stored their apples since 1917.
When I started work, there was around 40 mainly family orchards, local families in the area. Today, there's only 5 orchardists on the books. They're all still local families, but it's hard to know where our future's going if it continues.
Gavin Lang is one Harcourt grower who's prepared to stick it out for a while yet. But with rising production costs and shrinking margins, he says only a handful of bigger growers can meet the demands of the supermarkets.
It made it very difficult, so we took the approach of scaling down a little bit in what we're growing and selling it ourselves.
In recent years, Gavin Lang has had to clear off more than 20 acres of these traditional trees because they're labour intensive and no longer profitable. He's now downsized to smaller high-density orchards to meet the growing demand for affordable apples.
Turns it into a 7-day-a-week job sometimes, but it is satisfying when a customer that actually eats the product tells you how good it is as well.
Eden Hennanen, ABC News, Harcourt.
Environmental experts are raising concerns about the future of the southern right whale. Breeding season has come and gone, and the nursery and its public viewing platform remained eerily empty.
Every day for the last month, Peter Reid's come to Logan's Beach hoping for the best. And so far, he's flat out of luck.
I haven't seen a whale for 34 days.
And when it comes to southern right whale calves, his runabouts extends to months. This winter was supposed to be a blockbuster breeding season for the critically endangered animal, but none have appeared, and experts are worried.
We can only probably put that down to things like climate change having an impact on things like food resource, because I'd say that the number one thing that impacts their calving rate would be how well fed they are.
Less than 300 southern right whales remain in southeast Australian waters after decades of whaling nearly wiped the species out completely. Citizen scientists like Peter Reid and Bob McPherson play a critical role in identifying and tracking new whales as they're born, but they say 2020's been a year like no other.
This is the worst season I think I've seen in 25 years with whales, and probably for Warrnambool and the whole of Victoria.
Whale watching is big business in southwest Victoria. One national study estimates that each southern right whale is worth more than $1.25 million to Warrnambool's tourism, meaning concerns are both environmental and economic.
It's not very good for the whole town. People are upset, they get sad about it, but this is wild animal here we're talking about.
With this year's season all but over, whale watchers are turning their attention to 2021.
It is a sad thing, you know. I'm not happy. I'd rather have whales, but next season, mind you, one of my favourite whales could come back next season. So,
who's your favourite?
Her name's Big Lips.
Hoping an old favourite comes back with a splash. Daniel Miles, ABC News, Warrnambool.
James Fitzgerald lost his life's work when his koala sanctuary was destroyed at the height of the summer bushfires. 7 months later, koalas that were found struggling to survive in the charred landscape are now ready to be released back into the wild.
Jessie's Joey is, must be it's just between 5 and 6 months old now. So she was pregnant when she came in during the bushfires.
We were caring for animals that were stressed and had been exposed to direct flame and had burns and dehydration. And through that time, a really wonderful group of veterinarians and volunteers have helped care for those animals, and they're now in really beautiful condition. One of the females has a joey that's just about ready to come out of the pouch. We actually saw her on ultrasound on her very first health check, and all we could see was this joey's beating heart. Today we're releasing that joey with its mum back into the wild.
I'm going to tuck its little head back in.
Try and always return the koalas to their capture tree, just because they've got distinct home ranges, so we want them to feel that they're back in their home.
There's a lot of sadness. I lost my sanctuary. The whole 1,800 acres was burnt out, and I lost my houses. And we also had a large air tanker aeroplane crash. They were American pilots. It was a Canadian plane. For people to come from the other side of the world to help and then lose their lives, it's a huge tragedy. We named 3 koalas after those pilots, and the families have met those koalas. Thankfully, those koalas are going very well, but it's incredibly sad what's happened.
We want them to thrive, and they will. And if they need support, then we're also there for them.
Northern Territory wildlife rangers have caught what they believe is the biggest crocodile trapped in the Katherine region in years. The massive 4.4 metre croc was caught in a trap at the Flora River Nature Park, about 120 kilometres south of Katherine. Rangers estimate the crocodile is about 50 years old and say it's a timely reminder that crocs are on the move.
With the weather warming up, the crocodiles are becoming active. Obviously, they're moving into breeding season as well. The rivers are low. They're out looking for mates, particularly the big males. So, we tell people to be croc-wise all year, but it certainly should be emphasised at this time of the year without a doubt.
The reptile has been taken to a crocodile farm where it will join the breeding stock. When it comes to home crazes, Australians have fallen for everything from McMansions to tiny houses and everything in between. But one southern Queensland couple has gone a step further, living in a converted World War II bunker for the past 3 decades.
Deep in the bush near Miles in southern Queensland, an unusual structure is nestled into the landscape.
I live in an abandoned underground bunker, the same as this one.
Julie Hines has called a bunker home for more than 30 years.
It was abandoned in 1956, rebuilt in 86, and it's been empty for 30 years. Can't believe it was empty for so long.
Not much to look at from the outside. Inside is another story.
OK, come on in. Home sweet home. Good to be home again. I'll put the kettle on. You got time for a cup of tea?
The bunkers were built as part of a little-known RAAF base near Miles during World War II. Made from 10-inch thick concrete, when they were abandoned, many farmers around these parts used them to store hay. The Hines went a step further.
This is where we started from, Peter. There were no doors, no vents, no nothing much, just imagination at that stage. But it's been great fun. This is the same size as the one we live in. It's a good open plan. It's got bedroom, bathroom, kitchen and sitting room and dining room, or a lounge room really, and an office, which used to be a children's bedroom, but now is an office.
At just 12 metres long, it can be a tight squeeze, but Julie Hines wouldn't want to live anywhere else.
Right. They're wonderful, aren't they? No, well built, and all hand-mixed cement. Very privileged to have found it and to be in the position to have bought it when we did. Wonderful. It's been great fun.
Peter Gunders, ABC News, Miles.
5 long months after it was derailed by the pandemic, one of Australia's most famous trains is chugging along through the outback once more. The GAN has left Adelaide bound for Alice Springs and Darwin. Just the ticket for a tourism sector in need of some bells and whistles.
Back on track. The mighty GAN en route to Darwin for the first time in 5 months. The longest hiatus in the train's rich history.
She survived the Great Depression, the World Wars, pandemics, recessions, and never had 5 months off the tracks before.
90-year-old Edward Dowsett was born the same year the GAN commenced operations. He used to ride the locomotive when he worked as a stockman in Unadata, but this time he's travelling in style.
I love the bush so much. I can picture myself still out there and working on those places wherever I go.
Passengers are having their temperatures taken on arrival, with police making sure travellers have their documents in order to cross the border into the sunny top end.
All aboard!
We haven't been on the holiday yet this year. At long last we can make it from Queensland on the Gold Coast.
Looking at just relaxing and having a good time.
And some warm weather. With almost 100 passengers on board over the next 3 days, the GAN will make its way through the Red Centre, stopping at Marla, Alice Springs and Katherine before arriving in Darwin and then eventually returning to Adelaide. The operators say it'll provide a much-needed tourism boost to the outback. Full steam ahead once again. Sarah Mullins, ABC News, Adelaide.
The West Australian Government has described as exciting and ambitious proposal to replace a section of a popular tourist road with walk trails and an interpretive museum. If approved, the section of Caves Road near Margaret River, known as Koala, would be closed with traffic diverted inland.
It's the crown jewel along Margaret River's bustling tourist highway. Caves Road, with its towering forest of karri trees, and Kodak Corner, a head-turner that's been catching the breath of tourists for decades.
The karri forest itself is one of those must-visit destinations on the bucket list of every visitor that comes through the region, and you'll see them sprawled out along Caves Road trying to get pictures of the karri forest. But it really lacks any sort of interpretation or understanding of that really significant piece of the landscape down here.
But that could all change. Big plans are afoot to replace this iconic stretch of road with walk trails and an interpretive museum, shedding light on the shared history of the forest below.
We'll have the Aboriginal history, then the European history, and we'll have it contained within an area so that there's not roads and tracks everywhere and people get to enjoy this place for what it is, It's a beautiful living place.
The proposal has been put together by local environmentalists in collaboration with Wadandi custodians, who fear the forest's popularity with tourists could lead to its demise.
So this place was actually used with the caves as a burial site. So this is really significant on that side of things, and that's why we are trying to protect the area as much as we can and bring management to the area.
Indigenous employment is a key part of the plan, which has caught the attention of the government.
All our young people can actually have jobs and stuff and create and teach people about the culture and the history of the place, so that they can, like we said, so they can be employed in this place and have somewhere and something to be proud of.
There have already been discussions between the state government and proponents of the project, and if it does get the green light, this stretch of road will be moved inland to keep the area free of noisy traffic. In its place, a low-impact showcase for this unique corner of Australia's southwest.
So it makes me feel really happy that after all these years, we're getting to a place where we can actually all enjoy the environment and the culture and everything else as it is.
While the cost of closing this section of road and diverting it is yet to be clarified, it's clear there's a will to put a shared history on display for all to enjoy. Anthony Pansia, ABC News, Margaret River.
That is the latest from ABC Regional News for now. You can keep up to date with all the latest on the news channel, online and on ABC Radio. I'm Miriam Corowa. Thank you for your company.